All right, so let's unpack this whole birthright citizenship thing.
Yeah.
You sent us a ton of articles from Mother Jones, the Brennan Center, the Dispatch, and the 19th.
Okay.
All kind of looking at different angles of this hot button issue.
Right.
Looks like you want to get a handle on this whole debate, understand the legal arguments.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the potential consequences of changing this.
Yeah.
Plus, you included a statement from Senator Tim Kaine.
Oh, wow.
So, always interesting to get like a direct perspective from somebody in the thick of it.
Absolutely.
So what does it all mean for the U.S.?
Right.
That's our mission for today's deep dive.
Okay. I'm ready.
So to kind of kick things off,
Yeah.
it seems like this all started, on President Trump's first day back in office. He signed that executive order aiming to end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants.
Exactly. He claims it's based on a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. But what's really interesting is that it goes way beyond just the legal technicalities. The Dispatch actually argues that the administration is trying to frame this as a national security issue.
Okay.
So they're really tapping into anxieties about border control and changing demographics.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
We've got the 14th Amendment at the core of this, but there's also this layer of like political strategy going on.
Right.
What are some of the arguments that they're using beyond just the legal stuff?
Well, one of the main points that they bring up is that birthright citizenship incentivizes illegal immigration.
Okay.
So they're saying that it acts as like a magnet encouraging people to come here, specifically to have children who will then be U.S. citizens.
Okay.
The Dispatch actually uses the term perverse incentive, and they say that it undermines efforts to control immigration.
But wouldn't that argument also apply to like other aspects of our system? Like, I mean, people would still be motivated to come here for economic opportunity,
Right.
family reunification, even without the birthright citizenship.
That's a great point. It raises the question of whether ending birthright citizenship would actually address the root causes of undocumented immigration,
Right.
or if it's more of like a symbolic gesture.
Right.
It's really interesting.
So we've got that framing.
Yeah.
But let's dig into the legal side a little bit too.
Okay.
14th Amendment, specifically the citizenship clause. Seems pretty clear on the surface, right?
It seems that way, yeah. It states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States
Right.
and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But the administration is focusing on that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Right.
They're claiming that children of undocumented immigrants aren't truly subject to U.S. jurisdiction
Right.
in the same way that citizens are.
Exactly. And that's where this debate gets really interesting, because the Brennan Center actually fires back with a strong counter-argument.
Okay.
They point out that everyone in the U.S., regardless of their immigration status, has to obey our laws and pay taxes. They're subject to the same legal system.
It's not like they're living in some kind of legal vacuum within the U.S.
Exactly.
They're still bound by our rules.
Right.
They're contributing to our society.
Exactly. And they argue that this demonstrates very clearly their subjection to U.S. jurisdiction.
Okay.
So the Brennan Center is basically saying that the administration is trying to create a distinction where there isn't one, just to fit their policy agenda.
So where does Senator Kaine fit into all this?
Well,
His statement seemed pretty fired up.
he did not hold back. He basically called this executive order a blatant attempt to deny Americans their constitutional rights.
Wow.
And he argues that the 14th Amendment is clear and unambiguous,
Okay.
and that the president can't just reinterpret it on a whim.
So it seems like he's not just concerned about the legal implications, but also about the consequences for like
Well, absolutely.
real people.
Real people, exactly.
This isn't just a theoretical debate.
No, not at all. And this is where the 19th reporting is so powerful, because they highlight that human side of this issue. Okay.
They talk about the potential for chaos and hardship if birthright citizenship is suddenly taken away.
Right. They talk about babies being left in legal limbo, unable to get social security numbers or even basic identification.
Exactly. It's hard to imagine trying to navigate life in the U.S. without those things.
And imagine the stress for families facing potential deportation.
Oh, my God.
It's one thing to worry about your own future,
Yeah,
but to add the uncertainty of your child's legal status,
absolutely.
it's a whole other level of anxiety.
It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that these policy decisions made in Washington
Yeah.
have very real-world consequences for individuals and families.
For sure, and we're just scratching the surface here.
Okay.
I mean, we've got to delve into the historical context of the 14th Amendment.
Right.
We could explore other countries' approaches to birthright citizenship.
Okay.
And we could even consider the economic implications of this whole debate.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
We've still got plenty to unpack right here in part 1.
Right.
We've covered the legal arguments, the political strategy. We've even started to touch on some of the potential consequences.
Exactly. And we haven't even gotten to Senator Kahn's point about how this issue could redefine what it means to be American.
That's a big one.
That's a conversation for another time, though.
For sure, we'll be back to dig deeper into those fascinating points that you just mentioned.
I can't wait.
But for now,
yeah,
we'll take a quick break.
You know, picking up on that point about the human impact.
Yeah.
One of the things that the 19th really hammered home was this whole potential for statelessness.
Right. The idea that children born here could end up belonging to no nation at all.
Yeah.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
How could that even happen in the U.S.?
Well, it all comes down to, like, the complex interplay of different countries' citizenship laws.
Okay.
Some countries don't automatically grant citizenship to children born abroad, even if their parents are citizens.
So if a child is born in the U.S. to parents who can't pass on their own citizenship.
Right.
And the U.S. doesn't grant birthright citizenship either.
Exactly.
They would just be stateless.
They would be stateless, yeah.
Yeah.
The 19th actually highlights a few real-world cases where this almost happened.
Wow.
You know, imagine being born in a country and then essentially being told you don't belong anywhere.
It's hard to fathom the level of uncertainty and vulnerability that would create.
Right.
And wouldn't that impact their access to things like education and healthcare too?
Oh, absolutely. Without legal status, they could face significant barriers to accessing even the most basic services.
Yeah.
The 19th pointed out that healthcare in particular could become a major issue.
Because without a social security number, it would be nearly impossible to get health insurance.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about adults here.
Right.
Imagine newborn babies.
Oh, wow.
Being denied essential medical care simply because of their parents' immigration status.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. It feels like we're moving away from that melting pot ideal.
Yeah.
And towards something much more divided.
Right.
And that's another point that the dispatch brings up is this potential damage to America's history of successful assimilation.
Yep.
They argue that ending birthright citizenship could create like a permanent underclass, you know, further dividing the nation along lines of citizenship.
So instead of encouraging integration, it could actually have the opposite effect.
Precisely. And they suggest that this could fuel resentment and distrust,
Wow.
making it even harder to address the root causes of illegal immigration in the first place.
It seems like this debate is about so much more than just the legal technicalities.
It is.
It really taps into deeper anxieties about national identity and belonging.
You hit the nail on the head. The dispatch even went so far as to say that ending birthright citizenship would be a rejection of the very principles that have made America a beacon of hope for so many.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement.
It is.
But it does make you think about, like, the message this sends.
Right.
It's like saying, you could be born here,
right,
but you're not really one of us.
Exactly. And how does that impact those kids growing up? How do they feel about their place in American society?
Right.
It's a complex social experiment with potentially far-reaching consequences.
It really is. And it's not just about the future either.
Yeah.
The Brennan Center article highlighted how deeply this issue is rooted in our past.
Right.
Specifically, the history of the 14th Amendment.
Absolutely. Remember, the 14th Amendment was ratified after the Civil War.
Yeah.
To guarantee citizenship to formerly enslaved people.
Right.
It was a direct response to the Dred Scott decision, which had denied them that right.
So it's a landmark achievement in the fight for equality and civil rights.
Absolutely.
And to see that very amendment being used to potentially deny citizenship to another group of people is...
That's ironic.
It's incredibly ironic.
Yeah.
It seems like we're constantly grappling with the same fundamental questions about who belongs and who gets to be considered American.
Right, and those questions become even more complex in an increasingly globalized world.
Yeah.
You know, while the U.S. has always had birthright citizenship, many other countries don't.
So how do those countries handle the issue of children born to non-citizens?
Yeah.
Do they have, like, similar debates?
It varies widely. Some countries grant citizenship based on the parent's nationality, while others have much more restrictive policies.
Okay.
It's a fascinating area to explore because it shows how different societies grapple with these same fundamental questions.
Right. That comparative perspective is so valuable.
Yeah.
It helps us understand where the U.S. fits within the global landscape on this issue.
Exactly. And it also highlights the unique challenges and opportunities that come with having a diverse and constantly evolving population.
Speaking of challenges,
Yeah.
the dispatch made a really intriguing point about the potential impact on America's global competitiveness.
Oh, that's right. They argued that ending birthright citizenship could actually harm our economic prospects,
Okay.
especially in the face of competition from rising powers like China.
Because it could shrink our workforce,
Uh-huh.
make us less attractive to skilled immigrants.
Exactly. They point out that the U.S. has traditionally relied on immigration to maintain a relatively young and growing population,
Right.
which is crucial for economic dynamism.
It's fascinating to think about how our immigration policies, even something as specific as birthright citizenship, could have these ripple effects on a global scale.
It really is. It shows how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
And it raises the question, are we making decisions that will strengthen our position in the world or weaken it?
It's a lot to consider, that's for sure. We've explored the potential human consequences, the historical context, the global perspective, even the economic implications.
And we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this complex and multifaceted issue.
Right.
There's still so much to unpack.
Well, we've got one more part to this deep dive. So let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and then jump right back in. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Legal battles, historical roots, global comparisons, even the economic angle.
It's a big one.
You know, going through all of this,
Yeah.
I've been struck by the sheer passion on both sides of the argument.
Absolutely.
It's not just a dry legal debate.
Yeah.
It's something that people feel deeply about.
They do, and it's important to acknowledge that there are legitimate concerns on both sides.
Okay.
It's not about good guys and bad guys,
Right.
but about grappling with a complex problem that has no easy solutions.
The dispatch, even while raising concerns about potential exploitation,
Yeah.
they cautioned against making sweeping changes that could do more harm than good. They seem to advocate for a more targeted approach.
Right. They weren't necessarily defending the status quo,
Okay.
but they were urging caution and a deeper understanding of the potential unintended consequences.
So instead of focusing on ending birthright citizenship altogether,
Right.
they suggested looking at specific areas where reforms might be needed. For example, they mentioned birth tourism
Right.
as a potential area for stricter regulation.
Exactly. That way you could address those specific concerns without undermining the fundamental principle of birthright citizenship for everyone born in the U.S.
Okay, so it's more of a nuanced approach.
Fair.
And it seems more in line with their overall argument that we should be focusing on building a more competitive and effective immigration system,
Right.
rather than getting bogged down in these symbolic battles.
Exactly. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone,
Right?
not just trying to score political points.
Yeah.
And that requires a willingness to engage in thoughtful dialogue and to consider the long-term implications of our choices.
It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest sounding solutions can actually create more problems than they solve. And when it comes to something as fundamental as citizenship,
Yeah,
we need to be incredibly careful about the decisions we make,
for sure.
especially considering the very real human impact.
Right.
The 19th really drove that point home,
They did.
with their reporting on the potential for chaos and hardship if birthright citizenship were to end. Those stories about families facing legal limbo,
Yeah.
babies being denied basic documentation, fear of deportation.
Yeah.
It really puts a human face on this issue.
It does.
It's easy to get lost in the legal arguments,
Right.
but we can't forget that real lives are at stake.
Absolutely. And those lives will continue to be impacted even as the legal battle over President Trump's executive order plays out.
Right.
I mean, it could take years for this to be resolved.
Yeah.
In the meantime, countless people will be living with uncertainty and anxiety.
It's a reminder that policy decisions made in Washington, even those that seem abstract or theoretical, have very real and immediate consequences for people on the ground. And it also highlights the power of public opinion.
Right.
This is an issue that people care deeply about.
They do.
And the way it plays out in the courts and in the political arena will be heavily influenced by public sentiment.
For sure.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener?
Right.
You've clearly done your homework on this issue. You're trying to make sense of a complex and often contentious debate.
Absolutely.
We've explored the arguments, the history, the global context, even the economic implications.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the question of whether to maintain or modify birthright citizenship is a question for all of us as a society to answer.
It is a big one.
It's about deciding what kind of country we want to be, what values we prioritize, what kind of future we want to create for generations to come.
For sure, and that starts with informed and engaged citizens like you.
Right.
We encourage you to continue learning, to have those difficult conversations, and to make your voice heard on this crucial issue.
Because in a democracy, every voice matters.
Absolutely.
And the choices we make today will shape the America of tomorrow.
They will.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time for another exploration of a fascinating and timely topic.